FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz, and today is 11/26/19. Well, the Democratic band of gypsies here who are attempting to run for president, they've got a couple of pleasant, unwelcome additions. We're talking about Mayor Mike Nanny Bloomberg, former mayor of New York City, and major opponent of guns and big gulp sodas. And we're talking about Deval Patrick, former governor of Massachusetts, who really made a mess of things. His nickname was Coupe Deval because he leased a Cadillac to be his official car when he was governor. And, well, you know, you just can't make this stuff up. What's going on? Who do you think is going to be the actual nominee, Democratic nominee for president? Please let us know. Share with us your opinion. The email address is kl@kerrylutz.com. Well, John Rubino is on with us now. And John, I hear a rumor you were thinking of running for president?
I lived in New York for a little while. That seems to be a qualification. Now, Kerry, as a New Yorker, this must be fun for you. Seeing all your boys run for president. You had the mayor run for a little while, yep. And now you got the governor. So it must be hard to decide who to vote for with all these local boys.
I don't think any of these candidates are the ones who are actually going to be the nominee for the actual candidate for president. I'm not saying it's going to be Hillary Clinton, although that's always a possibility. You know, they'll have to get her one of those exoskeletons to walk her around and all that, like they use in the army. But somebody is going to come out from behind the curtain. I don't think it's going to be Andy Cuomo. I don't know who it's going to be, but these people don't have a prayer. Well,
I think it's what they represent more than what they will actually do. Yeah, it's way late in the process for them to be getting in. They would have been legitimate candidates on day one, but God, now the primaries are almost starting now. So it's very late for them to put an organization together and to have much of an impact. But I think they represent the terror that mainstream Democrats feel now when they look at what's happening with Biden kind of fading and Bernie Sanders picking up some of Biden's slack. It seems like, he's 1 or 2 in a lot of polls now. And the idea of an avowed socialist being the Democrat standard bearer in this upcoming election is a lot like what Republicans felt when they were thinking, oh my God, Donald Trump is going to be our nominee. What are we going to do? But in the case of the Democrats, some of the mainstream guys who didn't run are now running. And, there's a lot of speculation about what their point is, like what they're trying to accomplish. And I think the most reasonable explanation for this is that they really want a convention that isn't definitive. In other words, they want a division. They want enough people on the mainstream side of the ledger to make it possible for a mainstream candidate to be the compromise guy. And maybe even open the door for Hillary Clinton to step back in and say, okay, we're evenly divided, but I can get 51% of the delegates. So let me come in and be your candidate, which would be hilarious. This would be so much fun if it plays out that way. But, it's conceivable that Bloomberg and Deval Patrick and Biden, between the 3 of them, get a majority of the delegates. And then they just have to figure out which mainstream guy gets to be the candidate. But it's looking like Biden can't do it alone. And that, I think, is partially why you've got these new moderates coming in. But, there's a mini civil war going on in the Democratic Party right now. It's fascinating to watch because, it seemed like the Republicans would be the party that melts down because, it was always the case that there were 3 kind of incompatible groups in the Republican Party. You had the country club Republicans who just want things to be the way they have always been, and the fundamentalist Christians who want. I don't think I'm going overboard by saying that they like the idea of a theocracy, and then you got the libertarians who just want the government to shut up and go away. That's a tough mix, but the Republicans under Trump are all like, okay, well, we're all Republicans and we'll all vote for Trump. So they're pretty well unified right now. But the Democrats have very different interpretations of why they lost last time around. The far left Democrats say it was because the party has stopped addressing the concerns of working people. They want to go back to an FDR and beyond kind of liberal activism, and which illustrates why you've got an avowed socialist as one of the leaders in the party right now. And then they've got a lot of people who are basically the Obama-Clinton wing of the party who say, you know what, middle of the road is the way you win elections, and it's how you get things done. You get things done incrementally, where you get something like Obamacare passed, which is very imperfect, admittedly, but it's an actual national health care plan. And then you revise it year after year until it's pretty good, like Microsoft did with the Windows operating system. The first version was horrendous, but they kept at it. And now version
like the
25
iPhone.
Or whatever works all right.
And the iPhone, same thing. iPhone wasn't much at first; it's kind of useless, but look what it is now.
Yeah. So that's the rationale of the moderate wing of the Democrat Party is you can't get everything at once, but you can get a lot if you just keep plugging away at it. And then the left wing of the party says, no, let's just get everything right now. Why are we bothering with crappy, when we can have great? Let's just get great right away. And these guys really don't see each other's point of view at all. So it's hard to imagine how you get 95% of the Democrats enthusiastically working for one or the other of these guys, Biden or Bernie Sanders, let's say. And Elizabeth Warren is she's a little bit further in the middle than Bernie Sanders is, I guess. But still, she's got some big flaws too. So it's hard to see how the Democrats coalesce around anybody when the time comes. And really all they share is a hatred of Trump. And that might be enough. But it definitely might not be. So this is going to be really interesting to watch.
You look, this is old line wisdom, but I believe it to be so. You can't just run against somebody or run against something. You got to run for something. And what they stand for, I think that the majority of people in the country don't want, like totally open borders, like welfare and Medicaid, Medicare for all, even illegal aliens, and just one crazy thing, tax the rich. Hey, well, that sounds great in theory, but as well as I know, John, that in reality, it's always the middle class that winds up getting taxed when they create these new programs, right? I mean, this isn't my imagination. This is so.
Well, yeah. So socialism in its purest form always and everywhere fails, of course, because it's really contrary to human nature to just level everybody down and basically punish success via the tax code and other things. So you basically have to have a capitalist system to have any sustainability, to have something that can work over long periods of time. But you got to figure out how to smooth off the rough edges of free markets and capitalism. Yeah. And that's the kind of system that works over time and lifts people up over time. So you can't just take the shortcut of immediately making everybody equal. And that's not a philosophical argument. That's a historical argument. Yeah, every time you have socialism in any pure form, it collapses around the people who brought it about. Having said that, it's easy to see why people are frustrated here and everywhere else. The gap between rich and poor has almost never been bigger than it is right now, and more blatant. And life has very seldom been harder for regular people right now. All the jobs being shipped to China and old style union factory work becoming basically extinct in the U.S. with nothing really to replace it except driving Ubers. So it's easy to see why people are frustrated and want to just get right to it.
Doing podcasts and becoming YouTubers. I mean, the automation talked about this recently. Doesn't seem to be affecting those yet, but they're trying. And, it's scary. I think it's more fear because the job situation's pretty good. Yes, wages have fallen behind, but they've really picked up in the past 3 years by over 10% for the middle class, which, hey, they got a long ways to go, but at least it's somewhat heading in the right direction. Corporate profits are still going up, largely as a result of the tax cut more than the actual improving operations of the companies. But you got a housing sector. Look, if you want a job right now, John, you can get one. Might not be your ideal, might not be your dream job, but let's face it, everybody's always pretty much hated their jobs, right?
Yeah. Well, the quality of the jobs that are available now are lower than they used to be. I was a member of the United Steelworkers Union when I was 17 years old. I just walked up to a factory and said, "Hey, you need anybody?" And they said, "Sure, come on in." And I was making union money at 17. Usually nothing like that happens in this world.
No.
Yeah. And so if you're a 40-year-old high school educated person, life is incredibly hard for you right now.
Unless you're an electrician or a plumber. Hey, your plumber is probably making more money than you, John. And
there are skilled jobs that are in demand. Right?
And if you can fix electric vehicles, I think the future is going to belong to you, because the old mechanics of yesteryear, even at the dealers, are becoming obsolete because these cars don't have transmissions, they don't have engines, they have motors, and you got to know how to work with 220 volts without killing yourself. Opportunities are there, but overall, I agree with you 100%. The middle class has taken it on the chin in the name of globalism.
The vast majority of new jobs that are created right now, and a lot of jobs are being created, that's absolutely true, but they're in food service or hospitality in general, which means you can clean toilets in a hotel, or you can bring food from the kitchen to the table in a restaurant, and someone will hire you to do that, but it's not a way to support your family or to progress in life, really.
And minimum wage jobs are, these jobs are very no skill, low skill, a lot of them for sure. But I think other jobs, look, one thing, there's a great website that you should really take a look at called collegescorecard.ed.gov. And you can type in any college name in there, and it'll tell you how much the average graduate is earning and what percentage of people are paying back their student loans, and the converse is who's in default. And we'll tell you how much debt they're in, and a whole bunch of other interesting stats there that really anyone who's thinking of going to college, or if you're thinking of sending your kids to college, you should take a look at. But overall, the middle class position has gotten slammed, largely a result of globalization. And John, we talked about this last week, is social unrest breaking out around the world, around the globe. And a lot of it, especially in Western Europe, has to do with this exact topic of people losing their high-paid factory jobs and those going to China and Asia. And then they're left, doing these other jobs, which they have to do to support themselves. And this is causing tremendous friction in the world. So, but a lot of the rich didn't get rich or aren't making money off of globalization. They've done it other ways, but they're all getting kind of lumped in there, aren't they?
Well, it's hard to separate out the good rich people from the bad rich people when you're working as a greeter at Walmart. Everybody who has no worries in life and is driving a great car and lives in multiple houses, they're all a source of frustration for you. And, that's something that has to be addressed. You can't have a capitalist society without upward mobility. People have to be able to improve their own lives, or else, because there's way more of them than there are of the handful of people who are comfortable. So you have to give people that opportunity. And when you don't, you get what we have around the world right now, where people just take to the streets. So that, we talked about this last week, so we don't have to repeat it, but it is, a big part of what's going on in the world. And that's why we have President Trump right now. And that's why we might have Bernie Sanders running against President Trump, or at least Elizabeth Warren. We might actually see an interesting debate between two competing visions of how to deal with this. In other words, how to re-energize upward mobility. Trump wants to bring jobs back via a change of trade policy, and Bernie Sanders would like to improve people's lives by giving them lots of free stuff that now costs them a lot of money. It'll be an interesting debate, and it's not necessarily clear that anything works now with all the debt that we've. Well, actually, it is clear that nothing will work with all the debt we've taken on. We have to get back to the financial crisis thing here, because none of this is fixable, because we're so over indebted now that the system breaks down regardless. There is nothing that can be done in the political sphere that gets you out from under debt of 350% of GDP. And that's kind of what the world is now. The global per capita debt, oh God, I don't remember the exact number, but it's some ridiculous number, like $25,000 per person globally. And so that's, people in Africa, people in Latin America, 25 grand per person. 100 grand per family of four, and to you, Carrie, that doesn't sound like a lot of money, I'm sure. But to a lot of people around the world, it sounds like an insurmountable amount of money to cover.
You know what it's like? It's like you gave your kid a credit card and they went off to college and you were debt free. And then one day you get the credit card statement and you're like $35,000 in debt. And you say, how the heck did this happen? And your kid's been spending it on parties, on rideshare services, on Airbnb, trips, travel, everything. And that's what Uncle Sam has been doing to us.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Today's show is brought to you by U.S. Gold Corp. U.S. Gold Corp is a U.S.-focused gold exploration and development company advancing high-potential projects in Wyoming and Nevada. U.S. Gold Corp has consolidated a district on Nevada's productive Cortex Trend and is advancing the Copper King project towards production in Wyoming, led by a team of prolific company builders and renowned explorers, including Dave Mathewson, who is directly responsible for several major Nevada gold discoveries. U.S. Gold Corp is well-capitalized and has an extremely tight share structure with less than 20 million shares outstanding and trades on the NASDAQ, a major exchange, under the ticker symbol USAU. To learn more, go to usgoldcorp.gold. That's usgoldcorp.gold.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Yeah, that's what we did for the whole world. Basically, we handed out unlimited credit cards to everybody. And now we're going to pay a price for it. So you think we should do some statistics, Carrie, about the economy? Will people
absolutely
okay? There was a report put out by a hedge fund called Crescat Capital just lately about divergences. In other words, under the surface things that are happening that are actually pretty ominous for the economy. And I'll just throw out a few of them and then maybe talk a little bit about what they mean. But corporate share buybacks, which have been the driver of stock prices going higher every year, are down now year over year. There's a thing called the CFO Confidence Survey, where they talk to chief financial officers at companies to see what they think about the future. And that is at the lowest level since 2009. In other words, CFOs are nervous right now. And there's a ratio of job openings to GDP. And those two things usually move together. So when they diverge, it's meaningful. And lately, job openings have plunged while GDP has not yet. So one of those two things has to move in the other's direction to get back to the normal ratio. And it could be GDP that plunges. And the ratio of consumer confidence to the unemployment rate has reached this massive cyclical high. It's higher than it's been before the previous two crashes. It usually peaks before a crash.
So that was consumer confidence to, what was that?
To the unemployment rate. In other words, when consumers are, when unemployment goes down, that makes consumers optimistic.
Right.
Because there are more jobs out there. And that ratio usually peaks at the peak of the cycle. In other words, consumers are most confident when unemployment is at its lowest. And it's at its cyclical peak now, a cyclical peak that is higher than the previous two cyclical peaks. So that usually precedes a recession and a stock market crash. There are a lot of others, but the final one is that central bank assets are rising way faster than the global gold supply, which implies that the sound money gold bug thesis that gold has to go up because the amount of money in the world, paper money, is so immense that some of that's going to flow into gold pretty soon. And that is more true now than it has been in the last few years. There's other stats, so I don't want to bore everybody with them. But table. In the aggregate, they point to under the surface danger within the economy because these divergences are all in the negative direction. And one way that this could play out is that we get the last piece of fake good news sometime soon when we settle the trade war with China. And that makes everybody optimistic. You get this relief rally in stocks and people start revising their GDP projections to take into account that the trade war is over. But this might be a case of buy the rumor and sell the fact, where that's the point where the people come out with their big short ideas and start slamming the stock market and are right this time, whereas they've been wrong for the last few years. So just a thing to watch.
Yeah. So when you start seeing all of these, what's happened to the inverted yield curve? That's gone back a bit, hasn't it? But it's still
it was very inverted, and then interest rates spiked on optimism over the trade war and over the Fed starting to cut interest rates again. And now interest rates are headed back down again, which means the yield curve is once again inverting. I think the 10-year yield actually got up above 2% briefly, and now it's around 1.7% on the 10-year Treasury, and falling. So for a while there, the yield curve was no longer inverted. Now it's starting to invert again. And you could make the case that the damage has already been done because the yield curve was inverted for a fair while. And historically, the trouble starts when the yield curve uninverts. It inverts for a while. And within a year, you're starting to tip into recession. And then that lowers short-term rates really dramatically because the Fed is cutting short-term rates and everything. And then long-term rates don't fall as far as short-term rates. So the yield curve isn't inverted anymore. So it's when the yield curve goes back to its normal positively sloping shape that the actual trouble in the economy starts. The inverted yield curve happens a year before all of that. So we're kind of keeping to that script right now with the yield curve having inverted. And if things slow down in the next few months because of all these negative divergences under the surface, and short-term rates start to get cut dramatically from here, then that'll be kind of the way the script usually plays out. So again, don't know how the future is going to play out in the short run. But we've got a lot of things to watch right now.
Yeah, well, the future is always uncertain, as we've heard in the past, but certainly the numbers are alarming, and they're numbers that you really need to be aware of and take note of because, as President Eisenhower once said, and I don't even know if he knew he was saying it at the time, things are more like they are now than they've ever been before, right? And
well, history does repeat.
Yes.
And one of the things that that makes this world seem like it's not really part of history anymore is the unlimited printing press that all the big central banks have right now. They can manipulate markets by creating new currency and handing it to various players out there in the global economy. And in that way, make old indicators seem to not to work anymore. They can't do that forever, though. Eventually, the laws of finance will will be applied to what's happening, and we'll end up back in something that looks more normal. And we've been levitating this system, even with all this debt, for 10 years now. This is a long, long expansion.
Mm-hmm.
And it won't go on forever. And when it stops, we'll end up with something that looks an awful lot like 2008, 2009, only potentially a lot worse because there's so much new debt now. So, it always comes back to precious metals in this kind of a conversation, because that's where you hide out when things get really crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say we settle the trade war. And
first phase of it. Phase one, we're not going to settle it. I don't believe that's happening.
They're going to make it sound like they settled it.
We're on the road.
Because it's going to be the greatest announcement of all time, and this is the best deal anybody ever got. It's going to sound like that.
Well, you could write the script knowing what you know, John. Let's face it. The best economy just got even better because the trade war is over. Hallelujah. And we're going to sell $50 billion worth of farm products to China. It's a lot of snake oil. But hey, we didn't even talk about impeachment, John. And it looks like that is going to go the way of the hula hoop very shortly. And women's long dresses, thank goodness. But
this is amazing that they ever thought that had a chance.
Oh my God!
What percentage of Americans do you think know where Ukraine is, or what its significance is, or why?
It doesn't have any other than it's a good place to launder money. Right?
Yeah,
you got to launder money. You go to the Ukraine.
But do most Americans even know that? Like, if we put a map up and just ask people on the street, idea. Where's Ukraine? I think, So I think the answer would be nobody would know. And the Democrats, for them to choose that as their issue is just amazing. They could have chosen all kinds of more easily understood things.
No, they couldn't.
But, I mean, you could randomly choose sentences from Trump's press conferences and impeach him over those things, and you'd have a better chance of succeeding than with what they tried here. And it did. Viewership went down continuously, and in all the polls now, most people just either don't want Trump to be impeached over this, or they have no opinion because they don't understand what the issue is.
Nobody gets it here. I mean, I semi-understand it from a legal background, but I don't really, because when is a bribe not a bribe? And, yes, if I give you a bar of gold instead of giving you cash, you're receiving something of value. That is a bribe. But if I ask you to do something for me and I'm not really giving you anything for it other than a meeting with the president, which they believe he's illegitimate anyway, so it's worthless in their way of thinking, how is that a bribe? By the way, Ukraine, it used to be called the Ukraine, but now they call it Ukraine. And it is to the west of Russia, the southern part. It borders on the Black Sea. Belarus is to the north. Romania is to the south. It also touches Hungary and Slovakia and Poland. So it was one of these battleground things, part of the Polish buffer ground to stop the mongrel herds from getting into Western Europe. I mean, that's what Poland was, and you got to believe the Ukraine was part of it, and it was part of Russia for forever. I don't remember how it became part of Russia, but it isn't anymore after the fall of the Soviet Union, but they want to get it back. So that's all you need to know.
Do you know the story of Khrushchev and Ukraine?
No.
Okay. This may be a false story, but it's such a good story. I'll tell it anyhow. The Soviet Union owned Ukraine back in the day,
right?
Which is Khrushchev's time is the late 50s, early 60s. And he was drinking with somebody one time, and he just got wasted. And as part of that party, he decided to set Ukraine free, and he just said it, as in a drunken stupor, and somehow got turned into policy. So they basically carved out what is now the Ukraine and made it kind of sort of a separate place. So when the Soviet Union broke apart, they got to be their own country. And that's why it's a country.
Yeah, so it was a semi-autonomous region in the former Soviet Union. It was also where the Chernobyl nuclear reactor was situated when it blew up. So they said, well, we don't want to clean it up. It's all yours now. Well, goodbye, Ukraine.
Okay. Also, at the risk of losing a lot of listeners here, because I'm sure most people don't think this is very interesting, but there is one other interesting thing about Ukraine, and that is they host a military base or a naval base of Russia's. That is Russia's only blue water port. That's the only naval base the Russians have that doesn't freeze up for part of the year. So it's a really important naval base.
Crimea.
And they're right next to Russia. And so NATO, during the Obama administration, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which is our European military alliance, comes to Ukraine and convinces their president to join NATO. Okay. Which is Russia's opposite, it's the enemy military organization to Russia. And what did we think Russia was going to do? So Russia obviously then felt compelled to intervene to protect their military base. So now they've got the part of Ukraine that has the military base. And we're, in the West, everybody's all up in arms. Oh, Russia invaded, well, what did we expect when we tried to take over their most important naval base?
Yeah. Oh, it's worse than that, John. It actually is worse than that because we helped engineer the Obama administration, helped engineer the coup, the overthrow of the former corrupt government, putting in a new corrupt government. And that was what really set Russia off. So somehow this place became strategically important when prior to that, nobody cared about it. So, of course, once Ukraine fell into the Western alliance, Russia said, we're grabbing that port, especially then the straw that broke the camel's back was NATO joining that. Yeah. And then they just said, the hell with you, and they took it over. Anyway, John, we kind of have to go, but I think we covered a lot of what's happening in the world here, a lot of why you need to keep an eye on this stuff because it's really very important. It's going to make a difference. It could lead to a war with Russia at some point. Who the heck knows? Thank goodness Trump has been in there stopping that. Okay, trying to mend things with Putin at the same time increasing sanctions and everything else. Schizophrenic policy, but somehow it's worked. Hey, make sure you check out John's work over at dollarcollapse.com, along with our work at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Email us kl@kerrylutz.com. The Twitter handle is @KerryLutz. Facebook page, Financial Survival Network. John, we will catch up with you next week. Happy Thanksgiving.
See you, Kerry. Happy Thanksgiving.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.